Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. It's my pleasure to introduce tonight's program, Empowering People, Food That Feeds You, which we are delighted to co-present with our treasured community partner, Eating for Your Health, formerly known by many here tonight as the Suppers Program. We are gathering tonight here on Zoom. This session is being recorded, and the live transcription will be enabled shortly. If you have any questions for our panelists at any point during the talk, we ask that you put them in the Q&A function and not the chat, just the questions in the Q&A function. With so many of us gathered here today, it may be difficult to see questions that are in the chat function. If you're using a mobile device, the Q&A function might be at the top right-hand corner of your screen. The library is delighted to collaborate with Eating for Your Health on the topic of food that feeds you, or food that feeds you, because the topic, and indeed the work that Eating for Your Health does, aligns strongly with the library mission of empowering people to develop literacies. In this case, health literacy and food literacy. To get this evening started, let me introduce Marian Ryanson, Executive Director of Eating for Your Health, who will tell you a little bit more about herself, this evening's program, and the work that Eating for Your Health are doing.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I've been in this role as executive director since September of 2019, and I can say, boy, what a journey it's been. Take a moment to settle in, and I'm just so glad that you're all here. It's a little bit of my background. I've spent a few decades working with businesses and nonprofits, helping them to develop practical business and marketing strategies. I fell in love with Suppers and the notion of eating for your health by participating in the garden program with Dorothy Mullen. I started making my own sauerkraut and dressings and began cooking and eating in a healthier way. For those of you here tonight who knew Dorothy, I'm sure this resonates with you. But before I start to discuss our future, I just want to take some time to remember and honor our founder, Dorothy Mullen. Dorothy's groundbreaking work and focus on helping people to eat in a healthier way is continued through our work and vision and mission and the 7 pillars of Eating for Your Health. So our mission is to share the benefits associated with cooking and eating whole foods for your health, provide support and help prevent and reduce the impact of chronic disease. So many people come to our programs with a new diagnosis or a threat of a diagnosis, or someone they love who's been recently diagnosed, or caring for somebody with a health concern. And through our programs and the other offerings that we have, they learn ways about the eating that really works for them and supports them through their journey. Dr. Pisciarati will be discussing the widespread health concern of metabolic syndrome. We know that awareness is the first step, and many chronic diseases can often be managed and even sometimes reversed by making lifestyle changes and changing what and how you eat. So this is where we want and can support you. Our support comes by providing courses and programs informed by robust science and research, all reviewed by our Chief Medical Advisor, and endocrinologist, Dr. Adi Benito, who you'll have the opportunity to meet later during our Q&A discussion. Most important is our vision. We provide a non-judgmental environment in which people can learn about ways to eat for their health. This non-judgmental approach is key, as we know that people learn best when they don't feel judged. So right now, you're all in a judgment-free zone, as you would be in any Eating for Your Health program. I want to emphasize that there's the importance of not judging others, but equally important is not to judge yourself. The process of moving towards eating in a healthier way is very individual. People are all going at a different pace. They have different ways that they are able to progress. Some people have greater access to healthier food. Other people have more time to prepare healthier food, but just don't feel hard on yourself. You're here because I think you want to learn more about how you can feed yourself in a healthier way. But enough about us. I want to talk about you and learn a little bit about what brought you here tonight. So if you are willing and can share in the chat why it is that you're here joining us tonight, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you. And as we're waiting, I do want to give a tremendous thank you to Kim Dorman and Susan Conlon at the Princeton Public Library for collaborating with us on this event. We support their mission, vision, and values of the library, and we strongly value this relationship with them. So is anybody sharing?
Yes, we have a couple people sharing, which is wonderful. I learned about suppers from Dor years ago when I lived in Princeton. She was such an inspiration, so generous and passionate. I live in Oregon now and continue to use suppers recipes. Just moved to Plainsboro and would like to reconnect to suppers and the organization locally.
Excellent. Well, as people wanted to comment and contribute, we'd be happy to share what brought everybody here tonight. So some of our values is that we believe that every person and every body is unique, that there is no single approach to food that is right for everybody. Oftentimes we'll hear about diets where it's like this person has to eat this much, same person next to them has to eat this much, same person next to them has to eat that much. And that's usually not the way it works. Every body is different. We start with a different biology and makeup. And so the food that we eat impacts us in a different way. We encourage everybody that participates with us to explore, experiment, discover different foods that reflect your taste, your budget, your background, your culture, and other preferences. There is no one size fits all. We don't advocate for any specific approach to food or a way of eating. We will never tell you what to eat, except that we emphasize the importance of eating single, whole, fresh ingredients and avoiding processed foods whenever possible. Just briefly, I'd like to share with you the 7 pillars of your health. Tammy will put in the chat the link to our website so that you can learn more. The first is how you feel is data, biological individuality, developing a taste for healthy food. This won't work if it's not delicious. Non-judgment, which we talked about before, which is so important in any time anybody is learning something new. Nutritional harm reduction, which is that incremental change that moves you towards being healthier in small steps of adding and subtracting different foods. Our relationship with medical practitioners and community partners such as the library, and also just providing ongoing support. Our programs and courses are delivered in different ways. We have at the table meetings, courses, presentations, workshops, along with practical tips, cooking lessons and recipes. We provide you with information and leave it up to you to decide how much information you can digest, what you can fit on your plate at this time in your life. So some of our upcoming programs, we offer a What's in Your Grocery Cart every month. The Breakfast Challenge also we offer every month. The next cycle is starting on February 6th. A few other programs, Understanding Inflammation in Your Diet, The Building Blocks of Nutrition, and a story, My Food Story, a journey of understanding a young person's perspective. And then in May, Nourish to Flourish, How to Live Successfully with Diabetes, which is a 5-part program. So that's a little bit about us and where we are, where we are. But I want to continue with the rest of the program and introduce to you 2 participants in our programs who are Heather Farley and Tim O'Connor, who will be sharing their personal stories about how they improved their health by by changing what and how they eat. So I'd like to introduce Heather.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Farley. I joined the group, formerly known as Suppers, in the fall of 2018. I believe in 2017, my doctor told me that I was pre-diabetic and I really needed to do something about my weight if I wanted to, not have it turn into diabetes. So I started seeing a nutritionist that works with Suppers, Jane Schwartzman, and it was nice going there, but the biggest problem for me was I wasn't good at cooking. I didn't know how to put things together. So after a while, I told her, I said, cooking's not fun for me. And so something she did was she recommended Suppers to me. And I looked at all the offerings that they had. At the time, there was something called a Soulful Suppers group. And it was just with a bunch of African-American women. And it was really interesting because I felt like a lot of the things that, I was going through, there were other people who kind of were going through that as well. And it was that some of the things that we eat, were very similar. And we were talking about, how to, make our, some of the things that we've grown up eating that taste good, make them healthier. And then eventually, I felt really comfortable with sufferers, and I was able to start going to some of the other meetings. And for a good year, it was just really a big part of my life. I was trying to get in a meeting every week if I could, because it just helped keep me on the right path. And it also just was nice to cook with other people, to and I was able to take that back with me even into my kitchen, where it just didn't feel like I was by myself. I know sometimes even in the Soulful Suppers group, we would do experiments together, and we'd start a group chat. Even there was one with, we were trying no added sugar, and for a weekend, we all just kind of supported each other. So Suppers was great for me, just for the community and the accountability at times, and also just the fact no one judged me. And so within a year, I went back to my doctor, and she told me I was no longer pre-diabetic. I had lost about 10 pounds. So, I mean, the biggest thing for me, I've seen so many people in my family suffer from metabolic diseases like diabetes, and inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and cancer. So just the thought that I could be doing something for my health, that I had tools for that. I really appreciate Suppers for that. I'm definitely, Marion reached out at like the best time for me, because I think with COVID, being kind of, when we missed those, being able to go to those meetings, I missed that. And I kind of retreated to some of my bad habits. So it was kind of a really good thing that they reached out with this event, and there's something to be a part of again. So I think that's one of the best things about Suppers, is that you're not alone, you're not judged. And then you're getting these tools that are always there for you at any time. There's so much to do on the internet, and people were just very helpful. There were people who, who would check on me, send me text messages, or people who would share articles and things like that, if we had talked about something and they heard someone was interested. So what I really appreciate, there's definitely the tools where you can kind of get them, but I feel like so many things are in one place. And I just, really appreciate the community that Suppers will now Eat for Your Health offers. So I'm looking forward to getting back involved and getting back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I do remember your story when I met you at Amy Frankel's dinner that she had, and I was just moved by your story then, and it's moving to hear it again now. So thank you so much for sharing, and we are happy that you're coming, that you have time to come back, and we are hoping that we'll be able to cook together and eat together sometime soon.
Yes, and thank you for reaching out. I needed. It was really good for me. I was like, oh no, they're coming back for me, and I needed it. So thank you.
Good. So I'm glad that it worked out. So next we'll hear from Tim O'Connor, who has had a different experience with us.
A little bit different. Thank you, Marion. Marion asked me to come and talk about my food journey. It's not a word that I like to use, but journey, it is a journey, right? So it's about your stages of your life and your evolving eating habits over the course of your life. And to understand where I am today, I think we need to understand where I came from. As a young kid and all the way through college, I was really large. By the time I graduated from college, I weighed probably close to 300 pounds. And I left college. I got a job in the city, an apartment in Hoboken like everyone else. And I made a conscious effort to lose the weight. And some would say that I lost the weight because I couldn't afford food because I was paying such high rent. But I actually made a conscious effort to lose the weight. And I lost 100 pounds, and I kept it off for 5 years. And I did it through an Atkins type diet, where I just ate protein, and it fell off like within 6 or 7 months. I lost 100 pounds. It was pretty amazing. But I was in my 20s, so my metabolism was out of control, crazy. And then I decided to go to graduate school, and I moved back home to my parents' house. I was going to graduate school full time. Then I proceeded to gain all the weight back plus. And I just want to reiterate, just state that there is no relationship between gaining 100 pounds and moving home with my parents. And that would be a discussion I would only have with my therapist, not here. But I gained it all back. And when I left graduate school and moved back out, I again made a conscious effort and I lost it all. And I have kept it off ever since. And I've always had a window of weight in my mind of 175 to 180 was always my goal area. And I did that through a very regimented constitution of running every morning, 3 to 5 miles, longer on the weekends. I ate the same thing every day, Monday through Friday. Every morning I would have 2 hard-boiled eggs, a slice of toast, a half a sandwich for lunch, and then a protein and vegetable for dinner. And I've done that I did it forever. And it never really affected me, or at least I never really realized how it was affecting me. With all the exercise and all, being very stringent on the diet. I did take Saturdays off because that was my cheat day where I could eat whatever I wanted. But I really restricted what I was eating. And because I was in my 30s and 40s, it really didn't affect me because I was always on the go, always working, always in the office. And then when I got into my 50s, I started noticing changes. I was feeling tired all the time. I brain fog, concentration, lack of ambition, tired all the time, hungry all the time. I would go to my doctor and tell him, I'm starving. I just ate dinner and I'm still starving. And he would say, just eat more protein, just eat more protein. And I would tell him, I'm still starving. And I was very hungry all the time, but I was still 175 to 180. And my joints all hurt and it was really tough. And I really thought dementia runs in my family. And I really was seriously thinking that I had early onset Alzheimer's. I was getting really nervous and I literally would go to my doctor all the time. And he's like, you're absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. Just eat more protein. And it was starting to be a real problem. So like I said, I just didn't think about it. I thought I was just getting old and that's all it was. And one day I was appointed the executive director of a school called the Dupree School of Art in Plainfield. And I'm an accountant. I'm not an artist. I've never run as a nonprofit. And a friend of mine said, call Marion. She's running a nonprofit down in Princeton called the Suppers Program. She'll, bounce some ideas off her. She can give you some guidance on how to run a nonprofit. So I called Marion and we were having a discussion, going back and forth about what each one of our nonprofits does. And she was telling me what Suppers was about. And I was skeptical. And she knows it. I'm not going to say what I said, but I was skeptical about it. I thought it was a really interesting idea, but I was like, really, I was a fat kid. And I was thinking, all I could think about was Overeaters Anonymous. And there's nothing wrong with Overeaters Anonymous. If it works for you, it works for you. But I was 12 years old and my mother would send me to East Brunswick Library and make me sit in a room with 50-year-olds talking about overeating. And that was not a good experience for a 12-year-old. But so we started talking and then I got on her mailing list and I got an email about the breakfast challenge. And I was like, you know what? Don't judge, which is a pillar of eating for your health. Don't be judgmental and let's see what the program's about. So I signed up for the breakfast challenge. And the first thing they sent me was a list of food that we would be eating every morning over a period of time. And I'm looking at the list, I'm going, that's the strangest thing. I can't imagine eating that for breakfast. There was turkey chili, oatmeal, obviously, an omelet that's just filled with vegetables, a chai pudding. I was like, these are total foreign things to me. I mean, I'm a hard-boiled egg and toast guy. So I went to the breakfast challenge and I followed the thing. I made a commitment. So I would have the turkey chili the first day, which I thought was unusual to have for breakfast, but it was really good. The second day, I think, was an omelet with a bunch of vegetables in it. And then there was the chai pudding. And then once a week, we would get together and talk about our experience and how we were feeling about what we ate and if it was affecting us in any way. So I didn't even realize it. It wasn't even conscious in my head that something had changed until I sat in that meeting. And we were sitting in the meeting, and I realized that this was not about a bunch of people talking about being overweight or about their issues with food. These were a bunch of people sitting around in a meeting talking about being healthy and eating whole foods and seeing how it affected their lives and how it changed their lives. And a light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, I wasn't tired anymore. I wasn't falling asleep at my desk at 2 o'clock. I wasn't eating lunch. I would eat breakfast at 7 o'clock after my run and then have to eat lunch at 11 because I was starving. And all of a sudden I wasn't eating lunch until 1 o'clock. And my joints didn't hurt as much anymore. And I was, like I said, I wasn't falling asleep. I had a lot more energy. The brain fog was gone. I became really productive at a time during COVID when everyone else was languishing, right? That was our new term around town, is everyone's languishing during COVID. I wasn't languishing. I was setting goals, setting examples, setting a program for myself, for my nonprofit, and where I needed to go. And I had a great deal of energy. And I didn't realize until I was sitting in that meeting talking with the other participants about how much eating these whole foods, eating real food, was such a positive experience for me. And then I realized when I look back at my life, I was starving myself. I was literally starving myself for years. And that the arbitrary number of 175, 180 is just that. It's not about the number on the scale. It's about your health and how you feel. And it totally changed the way I was eating, because eating a healthy breakfast ended up rolling into eating a healthy lunch, and then eating a healthy snack maybe at 3 o'clock, and then eating a healthy dinner. But not just a plain grilled piece of chicken with steamed broccoli, but an actual real meal had changed a lot for me. And it made my life better. And one of the great things about Eating for Your Health is that they have a recipe section on their website with these unbelievable amount of recipes. And all you have to do is put in one ingredient and it makes these suggestions. And I think my favorite part about it is that once you find a recipe you like, you could change the serving size. So it changes the recipe for you. Because I mean, it's me and my dogs. So I don't need to cook for 4 people or 2 people. It's one person. So I can make a meal. Well, usually we'll do it for 2 people. So they'll have leftovers, but it just makes it so much easier. And like I said, it really has changed the way I was eating. And it's part of life. It's part of your evolving, as you should evolve in every aspect of your life, right? Because life would be boring if you didn't evolve. I mean, I'm not going to eat the same things I ate when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I would eat Captain Crunch cereal for breakfast. I would never think to eat Captain Crunch cereal now, but it's I actually did once when I was in my 30s, when I was watching my nieces and nephews. I don't know if anyone's had Captain Crunch cereal. It was like eating glass. It ripped up the whole top of my mouth. It was horrible. But it was really, really exciting. And I'm really so happy that I got involved and I stopped judging the whole idea of the program, because it really has been a positive experience for me. And it continues on today. I use that recipe function on the website all the time. And it's been great. And things like, I would never eat beets before. I'm eating beets and avocados. Even when I lived in LA, I didn't eat avocados. But it's been great.
Tim, thank you so much for sharing your experience. It was funny when you actually came to the first breakfast challenge that we were running virtually. Mm-hmm. So it was an experiment for us, and everybody else was experimenting too. And when you signed up, I was like, oh, Tim's going to tell me what he thinks. So I was so happy to hear the positive experience you had, and sharing it with everybody tonight. So it really is something that you don't know until you try what's really going to work for you.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing your story, and using our recipes and spreading the word. That's what we want to do.
Anytime.
Okay. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Uma Pushwati. We are so grateful to have her present a lesson on metabolic syndrome, what it is, why it matters, and what you can do about it. Dr. Pishrati is a pediatric gastroenterologist with a practice in Seattle, Washington. She's passionate about helping children and families understand the connection between the food they eat, digestive health, and well-being. Dr. Pishrati is a 2021 Seattle Met Top Doc Award winner and participates in the Medical Advisory Committee for the Northwest chapter of Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and is the co-medical director for Camp Oasis, the annual camp for kids with Crohn's and colitis. We've only recently met, but I view Dr. Pishrati as an important partner in helping us for people to learn about eating in a healthier way and why it really matters. So I present to you, Dr. Pishrati.
Thank you, Marian. Yes, even though we did only recently meet, I have known about Dor. I never had the honor to meet her. I've known of her suppers program, Now Eating for Your Health, for many years. And so it's really, truly a pleasure, honor. I'm just so happy to be here on your behalf. I'm a gastroenterologist and I primarily see children, but I think, as Marian reminded me, children are also human beings, and what I'm about to speak to can be taken across the board. And I would just, say a big shout out to Heather and Tim, whose stories were enthralling and beautiful and brought tears to my eyes, because that's the sort of experience I want to be able to help the patients that I see and their families also have in their lives. And I want to show you through this presentation, and this is what my day-to-day practice is about how food is the best medicine and that we all need to be eating real food. I will start by telling you the story of how I got into this. So I'm trained as a pediatrician and a pediatric gastroenterologist, and I think that happened because I did my medical school training in India. And I became interested in nutrition probably because I learned about the traditional sense of malnutrition. Back in India, the developing parts of the world, we were seeing people dying of starvation and famine. And it's sort of come full circle for me. So I've been a physician for about 20 years. And it's really ironic that in this relatively short period of time, just a mere 20 years, the new type of malnutrition that I'm seeing myself having to focus and practice is the overabundance or the overaccess to poor quality food, or food-like substances, as we should say. So this is the new malnutrition, where we have overaccess to these ultra-processed, hyper-palatable, hypercaloric, poor nutrient quality foods. And right now in the world, while we see about 800 million people starving, we're also seeing almost the equal numbers of people dying a slow death due to obesity and the related diseases, which is what this topic is going to be about. Much of what I'm about to speak to, though, was not taught to be in medical school. It's still not being taught in medical school. What I've had to learn on my own is what I hope that in the future generations, medical school teaches children, their students, and that we don't have to see adult onset diseases affecting children, as I am having to see now as a pediatrician and a pediatric gastroenterologist. So the global epidemic, really the global pandemic of the century, while we're focusing right now maybe on the COVID epidemic, really we should think of as the obesity epidemic or the metabolic syndrome epidemic, which I'll explain in a second. And in fact, in the United States alone, the obesity rate has tripled since 1970. That's, I was born in the 1970s. It's doubling in the rest of the world, whether it's a developed nation or an underdeveloped nation. We're seeing obesity rate double. It's, doubling in Africa since 1990s, where we used to see more starvation and famine. Now they have their troubles with obesity. And this is all while we, as a medical society, public health has been so focused on weight and BMI and calories and obesity, then this has been happening right in front of our eyes, which is why I need to explain that we've been focusing on the wrong thing. We've been so focused on calories, while diet continues to be the leading cause of death, not only in the United States, but across the world. And it's responsible for more than 5 times the fatalities of gun violence, car accidents. It's overtaken smoking long ago. It kills more than terrorism. Diet-driven diseases, in fact, is now the number one cause of preventable life years lost. 75% of chronic healthcare problems, 75% of our healthcare spending is on diet and lifestyle-driven diseases. So I'm a pediatrician. 30 years ago, there was not a single child with type 2 diabetes. The only type of diabetes that we had in children was type 1 diabetes, or what we used to call juvenile diabetes. And now we see up to 25% of teenagers in the United States alone are either pre-diabetic or diabetic. And 90% of diabetes now is type 2 diabetes, and that's a diet preventable disease. So what we need to do, and what medical schools need to do, is that we need to stop worrying about obesity. It's not about obesity. Everything we know about obesity is wrong. It's not about BMI. As Tim was just mentioning, it's not about counting calories or how much we eat or what the weight is on the scale, because diets don't work. Tim said it beautifully. It's also not about exercise or energy balance or calories expenditure. What it is about is our biochemistry. It's about the quality of the food and how that biochemistry affects our biology. And what it really, comes down to is this thing we call metabolic syndrome, which I'm going to define and redefine in the next couple of slides, because I think if we get this under our belt, we'll understand the rest. So metabolic syndrome is what's causing 75% of chronic disease. It's a mix of sort of 5 things, which includes visceral obesity, which is obesity in the abdomen surrounding the viscera or the organs within us. It's also identified by high blood pressure, insulin resistance, which I will explain on a separate slide, high triglycerides, so not cholesterol, but triglycerides, and then a low HDL or high density lipoprotein. So these 5 factors together are how we define whether or not somebody has been diagnosed as having this condition called metabolic syndrome. So obesity, I would prefer, if we're going to talk about obesity, which I think doesn't do this subject justice, but if we were going to speak about obesity, we should talk about it the way the World Health Organization defines it, which is as an abnormal or excessive fat accumulation that presents a risk to health. So having a big hip or some fat under my subcutaneous tissue in the arm doesn't pose a risk to my health. It may not make me look beautiful or fit into a certain size of clothes, but it doesn't affect my health. What affects my health is any fat accumulation that's in my organs, in my liver, around my kidneys or around my liver. That is metabolic syndrome. So it's a cluster of conditions, again, I'm going to define it here, that increases the risk of early death from heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. So if you have metabolic syndrome, you're 2 times more likely to die from any other cause, let alone the metabolic syndrome itself. And in a child, for instance, if they're pre-diabetic or diabetic or they have metabolic syndrome, they're likely to die 10 years younger than they should otherwise. So the 5 identifying features are this large waist circumference, a high blood pressure, abnormal blood lipid levels, which is a high triglyceride and a low HDL, and then lastly, features of insulin resistance, which I'll explain again. So in the United States today, if you look at adults over the age of 20, what we've focused on incorrectly, I believe, as physicians, and we're still being taught in medical school, unfortunately, is to look at weight and BMI. So if we just look at that, we'll see that, sadly enough, the majority of the adults living in the United States are not at the normal weight based on BMI. Only 20% are considered normal weight. That really isn't, though, what we should focus on. What we need to focus on is the metabolic syndrome population, which now affects about 40%. It's expected in another 10 years, it will be 50%. Half of the adults living in the United States will have this condition. But if we know that this is the condition that causes early death, then we need to see the overlap between both the overweight and the normal weight individuals here. And in fact, they're saying right now, the last statistics out of the NHANES, which is the National Database on Nutrition, says that only 12% of individuals living in the United States are metabolically optimally healthy. In fact, 88% have some features already of metabolic syndrome. They just don't know it, perhaps. And in fact, it's 90% of the people who are normal weight and are on their way to metabolic syndrome that are being undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. So remember that metabolic syndrome affects almost half of the normal weight individuals. And yes, the majority of the overweight or obese individuals have it too. But remember, there's also this sort of sliver. 20% of those overweight individuals are perfectly healthy. They need not worry about dying early or stroke or heart disease or dementia because they're metabolically healthy. So we need to take the focus away from what we look like on the outside and worry about what's happening on the inside. Where is the fat being stored? So again, just to hit home the point that obesity is not the problem, obesity rates are rising at about 2% per year. Diabetes, and again, I'll remind you that 90% of diabetes worldwide is type 2. Diabetes rates are increasing at double that rate of obesity. So if they really caused each other, why would we see this discrepancy in their rates? So this is to focus on there's something besides obesity that's killing us. So metabolic syndrome, abbreviated often as METS, is organ damage from insulin resistance, which I will explain, which causes accumulation of fat in the viscera and especially in the liver, which is going to get home to the point why I, as a gastroenterologist who treats liver disease, am so passionate about this subject. And again, just to define it one more time, because if we don't get this under our belt, nothing else makes sense. Metabolic syndrome is a cluster of any or all 4 factors that increases our risk of early death. That's waist circumference being high, abnormal blood lipid levels, that triglyceride and the HDL, high blood pressure, and insulin resistance. So I want to explain that ectopic fat phenomenon, the fat being stored in the body, by showing you this MRI scan. So this is an MRI of a person. And if you look at this MRI scan, just imagine you're facing them head on. So they're in front of you and you're looking inside of their body. And I'll just work through the anatomy here for you. So this is the spine. You see the little vertebral discs in the center. On either side of the shoulders, you can see those bones. Those are the clavicles, the collarbones. Right under those are the lungs, which I've sort of highlighted in pink. You can see they're sort of spongy. The black is air. The white is the lung tissue itself. On either side of the spine, down below, highlighted in blue, are the 2 kidneys. They're sort of black in color. And then right across the body, starting on the right, extending to the left, is that large, black, dark organ. That's the liver. And then just for you to understand, this is muscle down here in the inner thighs. Medially, we have some muscle tissue, and then this is subcutaneous fat. So you see how fat is sort of a gray color. So with that sort of frame reference in mind, I'm going to now walk you through a couple of MRI scans. So this one on the left is that MRI that I just showed you. You can see the spine in the middle, the liver across. These are the lungs. This is subcutaneous fat. But let's look at the MRI in the middle to start. This is a person who you can see has some love handles. They have some subcutaneous fat. There's more than an inch to pinch. That does not worry me. What worries me is that we are seeing that same gray color inside of the liver. That means that this person's liver has been basically overtaken by fat. So normally in a healthy liver, up to 5% of the cells could be fat because the liver does store fat. It's part of our metabolism. But when you have almost a quarter of the liver having been replaced, instead of normal liver cells, now fat, and you can see in this person, their liver fat percentage calculated on this MRI scan is 24%. This is no longer a healthy liver. So it doesn't really matter that they not only look overweight to us and they're categorically defined as obese based on their their BMI, it's also that they have fatty liver disease. So they are sick. They have metabolic syndrome. Take in opposite of that on the right side, this person who seems to be quite thin. In fact, you can see they don't have a lot of subcutaneous fat. If we looked at them from the outside, we might even falsely be reassured that they're almost thin. In fact, there's a medical term for that. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside, it's TOFI. But if we look at the gray color in their liver, it's almost equivalent to the amount of fat that's seen in this metabolically obese person. And so this person also has almost a quarter of their liver overtaken by fat. So this person and this person are equally metabolically ill, even though looking at their BMI, one has a normal BMI, one does not. And then on the left is that original MRI scan. This person is interesting because even though we might have thought that they were overweight or even obese, we see all those love handles and the subcutaneous fat. Look at how pristine and black and clean their liver looks. They only have a 2.6% liver fat. So they're actually very healthy. They're going to live a long, healthy life. It doesn't matter that they carry some subcutaneous fat. That fat is inert. It's not going to cause them any harm. They're actually very healthy on the inside. They don't have metabolic syndrome. So we need to forget about obesity and what we look like on the outside. Forget this term, the BMI, because up to 50% of men and women, 50% of women and 20% of men with normal BMIs will actually have some sort of metabolic illness on the inside, and we don't know what's going on based on what they look like from the outside. So just to understand the science of how this happens, normal physiology is that when we eat a meal, and Tim actually spoke very beautifully about this, when we normally eat a meal, we're supposed to eat to the point where maybe we're full, we're starting to store some energy, fat cells are starting to be filled. And normally fat cells, when they get filled, they release a hormone. This hormone's named leptin. And that leptin is the satiety hormone, which then speaks to the hypothalamus, an organ inside of our brain, and tells that brain that we have now been fed, we're full enough that we're starting to store some energy, we're forming fat cells, and that should trigger some very powerful biochemical processes in our bodies to tell us to stop eating. We should feel that fullness. But the problem is we now live in a hyperinsulinemic state. So on average, adults and children today secrete 2 times more insulin than they did if we look at the data from 40 years ago. So we live in a hyperinsulinemic state. We all secrete too much insulin, and I'll explain why in a second. And when your insulin at baseline always is high, this is what happens in our body. Insulin jumps to that receptor in the hypothalamus and is able to block leptin from doing its thing. So now your brain doesn't get that signal from leptin, which is released by the fat cells, because you've already eaten too much. And guess what? You sense starvation. You're always hungry, just like Tim beautifully just said. He'd eat a meal and he'd still be hungry. It wasn't that he was addicted to food or he needed to eat too much. It's because his insulin was too high. And that was basically not giving him the satiety signal, and he sensed starvation. And so what we do is we go through this loop and we keep eating and repeat and keep eating and repeat. And then we do gain weight. And that's important to remember, that it's the biochemistry that drives the behavior. So you overeat because your insulin is high. You don't overeat because you're fat or you're addicted to food. Your insulin is high, that blocks your leptin, and that's what drives the biochemistry and the behaviors and the biology. So the vast majority of obesity, metabolic syndrome, certainly is driven by this hyperinsulinemia, high insulin. And as I mentioned before, the average adolescent and adult, and this is regardless of weight today, releases far more insulin than we did 40 years ago. And why is that? Primarily because of what's in the food or food-like substances that we are now exposed to. These are things that weren't available 40, 50 years ago. Number one, and first and foremost, would be sugar. So 74% of packaged foods, and this is what makes up 2/3 of our, the diet now in the Western world, 67% of dietary intake comes from processed packaged foods. These, in large majorities, contain some sort of added sugar. And so that, in combination with just greater sugar availability, sugar has become cheaper, accounts for at least 1/4 of the world's diabetes epidemic. And I mentioned before, 90% of diabetes is now type 2 diabetes. Plus, the food industry continues to give us larger and larger serving sizes. And if we're already leptin resistant and we're consuming not only more sugar, but larger serving sizes, this is why obesity has, tripled in the United States. And we will pretty soon have 1 in 2 Americans overweight, and 88% of United States citizens or people living in the United States already considered to be somewhere on the metabolic syndrome spectrum. So added sugar is hiding in 74% of packaged foods, and that's fully to be blamed, I would say, not only on a combination of us as medical professionals not knowing what we needed to look out for, but these big food conglomerates. They added the addictive substances, the sugar to these processed foods to make a profit, right? There's a saying that I heard once where we have a food industry that doesn't care about our health and a healthcare industry that doesn't know anything or care anything about food and the power of food and what food can do to reverse most of our diseases. The food industry, why I say they did it on purpose is because there's no reason why we need 56 synonyms. In fact, the last statistics I heard is that it's quadrupled this. It's over 200 names for sugar. They don't want us to know sugar is in all of these foods. They don't want us to know the names to look out for because they know that now we're starting to get wise to at least looking for the word sugar itself. There's sugar in our gummy vitamins. There's sugar in our cereal. There's sugar in our granola. There's sugar in our yogurt. Everything has sugar in it. And while there are many reasons insulin will be, spiking, sugar is probably the number one factor. I have this in front of me right here. This is a salt packet that is served in my own hospital cafeteria. And you would think this would be just salt, but even this little thing, if you turn it around and you look at the back, there's sugar in this thing. So if a packet of salt has sugar in it, can you imagine what's happening with the rest of our food industry and packaged foods? So leptin and insulin, as I mentioned before, they affect our satiety and our appetite and our sort of tendency to always feel starvation. But they also do something to the way that we respond to food with pleasure or craving, and that's through dopamine. So usually in a normal leptin and insulin secretion state, they clear dopamine. So you get less pleasure from the food, you crave it less. But if you're leptin resistant and you're insulin resistant, then you don't have that decrease in dopamine. So now you get more pleasure, you crave the food more. And that is why we know that sugar is at least 8 times more addictive to our brain than cocaine and heroin. And these are PET scans of brains, and you can see how sugar lights up that brain just as much as cocaine. So if we're exposing children to these addictive substances, and this is ultra-processed food, and then we're worrying about why they're getting adult onset diseases as children, we need to not look any further. We have the answer right here. It's ultra-processed food. So this is my world. This is how I got interested in this. I'm a pediatric gastroenterologist. So I started to see a condition that is now actually the most common chronic liver disease in children and adults. And it was first diagnosed or described in the 1980s. So when I was 10 years old, when I was born, this was not a disease. And now it is the most common chronic liver disease in the world. It was first described in children in the 1980s. And what they noticed in these children's livers is their livers basically looked like the livers of adults that until then we had only seen with chronic alcoholism. So we all know that if you drink enough alcohol and you're an alcoholic, you'll get a liver disease. But all of a sudden, starting in the 1980s, we're seeing children get the same disease and they're not alcoholics. So somebody slaps an N in front of this and say, well, it's non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because they have alcoholic fatty liver disease, but they're not alcoholics. So let's call it non-alcoholic. But we don't understand what's causing this. We just see that fat cells are replacing normal, healthy liver cells, and eventually these livers aren't working. What is it? So it's a mystery for some time. Children aren't becoming alcoholics, but what is causing this disease? And this was not known. I was not taught this in medical school. I didn't hear about this in residency. It was only maybe 10, 15 years ago that we came to understand that, lo and behold, it's sugar. So fructose. Fructose is the sweet moiety, the sweet part of sugar. Fructose and glucose equals sugar. So that fructose molecule is basically metabolized in the liver in the exact same biochemical enzymatic pathways as alcohol. So I give this talk to my patients, and I give out this pamphlet all the time that basically says sugar will damage your liver just like alcohol if you take it in excessive amounts. And I put a caveat in here because everybody, when I talk about fructose, always ask me about fructose in fruit. And I just want to give a clarifying remark that when you get fruit sugar from fruit in its wholesome, natural form, when it's inherently bound to fiber, it's not going to damage your liver. So nobody's going to get NAFLD or metabolic syndrome from eating fruit. You're only going to get it when you process that fruit. So again, back to processed food. We're not supposed to juice our food or smoothie our food. We're not supposed to process our food, because when you do that, you liberate the fructose, what the World Health Organization describes as free fructose, that fructose that's no longer bound to its fiber in the natural state. That's the fructose that goes to the liver. So it's very easy in today's day and age, if we're eating ultra processed foods, to exceed the healthy amount of sugar that a liver can process. That's 24 grams in 24 hours. Very easy to remember. 24 grams of sugar is the safe upper limit that the liver can metabolize in 24 grams, which is 6 teaspoons. And, it's so easy to get there if we're eating a lot of these packaged foods. A can of Coca-Cola, we may know is bad for us, but you can get more sugar just from eating one of these or drinking one of these smoothies that you might think of as a health food. I don't know. I've seen most of the medical students who rotate with me eating Cliff Bars for breakfast or lunch. It's a quick meal, and they don't realize how much sugar they're getting from one of those. We might eat something like this thinking it's a healthy soup, but if we pay attention to how much sugar is added to it, not to mention all of the other additives, we can easily exceed the 24 grams within 24 hours. On average today, people are consuming at least 4 times the upper limit of what a liver can tolerate. In fact, if you look at what our ancestors used to consume, on average, we're now eating 10 times more sugar than we did 100 years ago. So how do we reverse metabolic syndrome? This is not meant to be all doom and gloom. I do what I do. I treat kids because there is good news. This is reversible. This is preventable. This is reversible. This is curable. This is treatable, but we have to take the right steps at the right time. Like Heather, like Tim, we can make change possible. And it's so much easier in children because we have a say in how they live their lives. So we just have to change the environment. That's about the types of the food, access to the food, all about what the Suppers, the Eat for Your Health program is about. It's about eating real food. This is my saying. This is what I say in my clinic every day. JERF. I want you to JERF, which means just eat real food. Real food doesn't come in a package, doesn't have a barcode, doesn't have a list of ingredients, right? That's how to identify. Did it come from Mother Nature? Did we cook it in our own kitchen? Did we control what we put into that? Because if we cooked it, it's full of love. It's full of good quality, wholesome ingredients. There's no diet you need to go on. You just need to JERF. And when you JERF, you lower your insulin. When you lower your insulin, you don't have the leptin resistance, and you've just changed your whole biochemistry. You've changed your biology. And that's the cure for metabolic syndrome. There's no drug. It's food. So we can use food as medicine. If we look at the United States health expenditure costs, it's really sad to look at this. In 1960, we used to spend triple as a nation on food compared to what we spent on healthcare. And now we are spending at least double on healthcare as opposed to what we're spending as a nation on food. So let's, instead of eating food as a pill, which is basically ultra-processed food, food-like substances in a little package, how about we replace our pills with food? This is still not being taught to us in medical school. I barely learned this in my fellowship. I had to really undo a lot of the stuff I was taught in medical school. And we need to make the wholesome choice the easy choice. So I'm just going to end. I have just a few more slides here, but these are examples of things that my patients come to me explaining what they found as a fix for some of their problems. And, so I have kids who have been diagnosed with egg allergy, or kids who don't like to eat beans. And this is a parent showed me this. Oh, I found this thing my kid will eat. It's called Just. And I looked it up, and my jaw dropped, because they're making eggs out of mung beans and then adding all these chemicals to it and then selling it to children who think that they're allergic to eggs or maybe really allergic to eggs. And so I have to always say to myself, eggs are real food, mung beans are real food, but this is fake food. This is ultra processed food-like substance to make you look like you're eating eggs, but I'd rather you just eat beans. Why do we have to eat this kind of stuff? So the call to action I'd like you to leave with is just, we need to cook. We need to cook at home. We need to understand the importance of wholesome eating real food, or else we are going to be cooked. JERF, just eat real food. None of these chronic diseases are druggable. They are foodable. That's what my mentor, Robert Lustig, has said to me so many times. And if you can do one thing to reverse your hyperinsulinemia and your insulin resistance, it's by adding more fiber into food, which you will naturally get if you eat real food as well. Thank you so much. That's my last slide. So I'm going to now turn it back to Marian.
Thank you, Dr. Pisharati. I knew you'd be sounding alarms, which is what we need you to do. But we're here to help put out the fire. So people, just awareness is so important. Once you start to look at what you're actually calling food, which compared to what actually is food, it's a mind shift that you can't unlearn. I tell people you can't unlearn that 4 grams of sugar is a teaspoon, and that there's 10 teaspoons of sugar in a can of soda. Many people didn't intend to do that. Right. So just eating real food, and then learning, we teach people how to make it delicious. So, hoping that people will then reach for the almonds instead of the chips, or just adding more vegetables to their chilies or things like that. So I'd like to open the floor to questions. We have our entire panel here, and so Dr. Pisharati, Tim and Heather, our board chair, Fiona Capstick, she's a registered nurse and national board certified health and wellness coach, our chief medical advisor, endocrinologist, Dr. Addie Benito, and Tammy Sands, our program manager, who is so important for our programs, is here to help us through this the Q&A. And I know that I saw a couple of questions when fruit smoothies came up. That's a question we get a lot of. So
yeah,
open the floor.
Do you want me to address the fruit smoothie question then? Should I?
Sure.
Yeah. So it was eye-opening to me. So I think fiber is one of the most underappreciated nutrients. And you have to think about how delicate a molecule fiber is. So it's actually 2 things: insoluble fiber and soluble fiber, tied intricately together surrounding that molecule of fructose when you find it in Mother Nature. So take an apple, for example, or even a sweet fruit like pineapple or mango. The skin has a lot of insoluble fiber, the pulp has some insoluble fiber and soluble fiber, and then there's sugar mixed within. As soon as you put that fruit in the blender, today's mechanical blenders blenderize insoluble fiber into smithereens. That insoluble fiber is blenderized, the fructose is liberated into what World Health Organization calls free fructose. Free fructose will leave the gastrointestinal tract, go into the liver. Fructose tied to fiber goes through the gut, bypasses the liver, you digest some of it, and the rest is eliminated. So you don't get the toxic harm of the fructose. With the fiber, it's protecting your liver.
Great. That actually leads to our next question, which is, does baking fruit like banana bread count as processed fruit?
No, that's a traditional food you're making at home. That's not going to cause any liver harm. It's not about. So first of all, when you cook at home, you're going to make it with wholesome ingredients. And even if you were to buy store-bought banana bread, I'm sure it had something else added to it, perhaps even more sugar than you would have baked with it, or more bananas in it than you would have baked with it. So your relative intake of sugar will be higher, but I'm not worried. Nobody got metabolic syndrome from eating fruit or having banana bread baked at home. It's the advent of the food industry and processed food that caused that problem. So if you make banana bread at home or any traditional cultural foods, those aren't going to cause this problem.
Okay. Purnima would like to find out, how do we find out if we have fatty liver?
It's very hard to pick up on. One of the best ways to know this is you could do a liver blood test. There is a blood test for liver inflammation. It's called an ALT. And your doctor can order this for you. It's on the standard blood, chemistry profiles. Your doctor just needs to be made aware that ALT normal ranges have changed over time. And that's really tricky. So everybody, almost 2/3 of the population in the United States has some level of undiagnosed fatty liver disease. What's happened is the lab normal reference range for ALT has changed over time. So if you're a woman, you should have an ALT less than 22. And as a man, you should have an ALT less than 26. I have had kids come to me with ALTs of 65, and the lab said that was normal for them, and it was missed. So just, you have to remember, you can get your ALT checked. It should be less than 22 for a woman and 26 for a man. That is one way to check. Another way to check is to get a liver ultrasound. It's not as good a test. You can miss it unless it's a lot of fat. You won't maybe see it on an ultrasound.
Thank you so much. You were answering that exactly as somebody else was asking the same question in the chat about whether it could be diagnosed on the ultrasound. Jennifer Salas says, so to be clear, even adding fiber such as chia to a smoothie doesn't help. Is that the point is eat fruit and veggies, whole, cooked, steamed. Is that correct?
That is correct, because the chia seed is great. I'm not saying anything wrong chia, but is it going to re-envelop the molecule of fructose? No, it's not going to do it. You'll get some fiber, but you're still getting the free fructose.
Thank you. And just again, just to make sure we have the science and people are understanding it, because I think you really brought up a lot of questions for people. Angie Peer asks, I made a cauliflower soup which required blending food in a processor. Is that also a problem?
So vegetables don't have fructose in them. So I'm only worried about the liberation of this free fructose molecule. So a green smoothie, a vegetable being blenderized, yeah, you're destroying the fiber in all honesty, but there was no harm of the fructose being liberated. So that isn't the problem.
Okay, thank you. And I have, I mean, you were very effective. People are a little bit frightened. So they want to know how, is this, how can we reverse fat in the liver? What can we do?
Yes. So Jerf, fat in the liver can be reversed by bringing down your insulin. And how do you bring down your insulin? By eating less sugar, eating less processed food. So I see children with this every day, and I don't lose hope. There's actually studies to show that you can bring your ALT down within 9 days. Most of the children with me, their livers are healthy within 6 to 12 weeks. So yes, totally reversible. And I didn't mean to put so much fear into everyone, but at the same time, I'm sort of happy I did that, because I really do want people to understand that ultra processed food is killing us, and we need to start cooking at home and eating for health.
We're getting a lot of comments that people are, that this was a great presentation, that this should be played in school cafeterias. I do have another question from Lisa Feiner, who wants to know, what about exercise? You mentioned that this isn't just your physical size doesn't necessarily matter. It's really about eating food, but how does exercise partner with this journey?
And I don't mean to be hogging all the answers either. So Dr. Benito, if you want to speak to that, I'll put in my 2 cents on exercise. Exercise is excellent for our health. From our brain to our toes, we feel better when we exercise. That being said, you cannot exercise out of a bad diet. It's like you're drinking poison with one hand and you're going to exercise it away. There's no balance. That will not work. I see kids in my clinic that not only look tall and thin and they're super athletes, they're drinking Gatorade and Powerade because everybody thinks they need it, and they have fatty liver disease. So no amount of exercise can outrun a bad diet. It's great for you. Do it, but don't think you can get away with not eating healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a combination of exercise and good diet that really helps. You're talking about insulin resistance, so exercising will lower insulin resistance. But again, you cannot, the balance is not bad food. Exercise is not balance there. It's just an add-on to a good diet.
Yeah.
Dr. Benito, I have a question for you, and that's of any of the points that Dr. Prashadi has shared with us. Is there anything that you'd like to share as far as how it relates to your adult patients?
Yeah, I see this every day. I've seen, half of the people I saw today have fatty liver. Sometimes you see, like Dr. Prashadi was saying, you see an ALT that is a bit elevated. It's not even out of the range or the reference rate, not normal, but the reference range. But again, as a woman has an ALT of 31, that's not normal. That's not what it should be. Somebody who, may have, and you just see it, so I see it. And I'll tell people, it's about I had a normal ultrasound. I said, that doesn't matter. You can have a perfectly normal ultrasound. You can still have fatty liver. There are other tests that are a bit more, that we've done. I'll do, some biochemical tests like a NASH, which is an algorithm that labs can do. Both LabCorp and Quest offer it. And you can show, people have fatty liver. And, sometimes people like to see, what they have because it makes it a bit more real. But do I see it? Yes, every day.
Yeah, thank you. And Fiona, in relation to this discussion, can you talk to maybe one or two of the specific pillars of the organization that fits in or could be beneficial for individuals?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tammy. I was just thinking that for people who are sitting there thinking, oh my, yes, change is possible. And, one of our pillars, nutritional harm reduction, is a way of making a small change. And the thing about food is you can do it right now. You don't have to fly to the moon. Most people could buy an apple, or choose a vegetable, and even if it's a packet salad, it's fine. The no judgment is important in that regard. So change is possible, and thinking about making small changes over the course of maybe switching out some processed food just twice a week is a start for some people, and that can really take them in the right direction. And at Eating for Your Health, we're here to support people, with the recipe function that Tim talked about, with, finding ways of maybe putting together 5 ingredients that can be absolutely delicious, like a stir fry that you can flip over into something with a Mexican seasoning or an Italian seasoning, making healthy switches. So starting small. And, for most of us, we're all trying to find a way to eat that supports our health. And so, people are not alone.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to say Dr. Uma. I think that has a nice sound to it. What do you tell patients? We're talking about all of these, healthy foods, and sometimes that can be hard, right, for some patients and parents to access due to, their living style. So what are some things that you share for that more, group that may not have access?
And you bring up a very good point. It's been stated, even in the state of Washington, where I'm right now, that food insecurity has doubled in these last 2 years under the pandemic because of supply chain shortages and lack of, food banks being open. So yes, this is a societal problem, and I'm not saying it's easy. It may be simple, but not easy. But we can start with shopping the perimeter. Many times, if you find stores that will sell you things in bulk, that's one way to get ingredients cheaper, and you come home and you cook them. And I do think that to some degree, the food industry plays to a myth that their food is cheaper. I don't have it in front of you, but I have in my office actually come up with recipes where for $4.99, you can make your own taco with these ingredients, buy them in these stores, and it's going to beat the price of the Taco Bell taco. So it is doable. You need a support group, you need recipes, you need to experiment a little bit, and then you realize, oh, I thought it was going to be maybe harder than it is, but it is doable. Start by shopping the perimeter of the store, buying things in bulk, fruits and vegetables, dairy. They can be found, and it's again not easy, but it is doable.
Thank you. One question, actually, and I know Tim and Heather aren't on camera, but a couple questions for them, and then we have another one from the participants as well. But Heather, you mentioned community being important for your success, and how might Eating for Your Health do that virtually for you or for others?
I know even with the Soulful Suppers group, which we tried to keep it as long as we could. We even would just touch base virtually. I know something I was doing with my cousin, we would order food from like Sunbasket, and we would make them, and we would just chat and talk, and it was our time to kind of like get together and make it, and kind of like we would just FaceTime. So I know for me, community is a big part. I try to, pair it with something, or, even just sometimes getting, like a YouTube video or something like that. So it just doesn't feel like I'm by myself. I know that that's kind of sometimes the feeling. And I definitely do a lot of like, if someone else is cooking, hey, do you want to try to like do a virtual call? Do you want to, do it at that time? I know for me, it's important. It is harder. It was so much nicer when you could just like meet in a home. That was, that was an amazing feeling. But I mean, I think that there's like ways around it. I think sometimes like, I'm still trying to find those kinds of things. So I hope we can, continue to do that. And just even if, we meet and we talk about something, or just, how to get over something. I do think the community is important, and I have missed that for sure. We did do that a little bit with in the beginning, but it did kind of like phase off.
So we'll have to get together and brainstorm. Tim, you had mentioned about kind of your preconceived notion about what at that time suppers, was going to be. How do you share that now with others?
My preconceived notion. I tell people, they ask me I tell people what my preconceived notion was, and then, let them know about how different it is now. It's, I don't know if you want me to tell you what my preconceived notion was. But again, I really thought it was just another Overeaters Anonymous thing. And like I said, that was never my cup of tea. I'm not a big joiner, a community person. I always tell people I was born for a pandemic, because I have no problem staying in my house with my dogs and working from home and not talking to anyone. But it's my vision, like I had a lot of apprehension about going to those meetings for the breakfast challenge, but they were really great women. I mean, there were a lot of great people on that call. And like I said, it wasn't about weight. It wasn't about someone going, oh, I gained 5 pounds, or I can't lose this last 10, or blah, blah, blah. It was, I'm feeling better, and this food is making me feel better. And that was encouraging about the program, is that it's not about weight, that it's about being healthy, and eating healthy, and showing that food really is so important in your cognitive health, in your physical health, in your energy level. It's quite amazing. And I didn't mention it before, but I do suffer from ulcerative colitis. And when I was younger, we were always pushed towards this book called Breaking the Cycle. And it was kind of similar to this. It was about whole foods, and it was in the 80s. Nobody ate whole foods in the 80s, right? Everything came out of a can in a box. I lived in Princeton. I don't want to take up all your time, but you would go to that restaurant, The Annex. Remember down in the basement, there was a restaurant called The Annex, and it would serve you green beans out of a can, and you paid for it. But it's so different now, and that's, that book was way before its time, and it's one of the things of breaking the cycle and getting into eating whole foods. And like I said, it really has changed my direction in terms of eating whole foods, and my energy level and my cognitive level has really improved greatly.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. A question from our audience: is chocolate with high cocoa content, low sugar, a good one to kill your sugar craving?
I'll take a stab at it. So as soon as I hear that it's, coming in a package, of course, I need to look at the backside of that package and look at all the ingredients. But let's just say it's all wholesome ingredients. The science shows that if you're eating dark chocolate, anything over 70%, even though you'll get a few grams of sugar, perhaps, the benefits, the phytonutrients and the, antioxidants that you'll get from that dark chocolate are probably good for you, even though it's going to have a gram or two of sugar. That being said, all chocolate products on the shelf are not the same. So we just have to pay attention to what other things may be in that food.
Thank you for answering that. There's one, are frozen vegetables considered processed foods?
No, those are not processed food. Those are fine.
And it's just as long as there isn't a lot of sauces or things with it. I became really good friends with frozen food during the frozen vegetables during the pandemic. In my panic shopping, I actually bought a bag of frozen chopped collard greens. I throw them in everything. Well, not everything, in a lot of things. And nobody seems to mind. Like they don't, so it goes in my chili, it goes in my wraps for fajitas. It goes in my sauce that I make with my zucchini lasagna. And it's, and using, frozen, if you know yourself that you're not going to use the fresh vegetables that you have, buy the frozen.
Yeah. Same for fruit. I think I threw everyone off with the smoothie thing. So that's the only sort of thing where I was specific about fiber liberating fructose, but otherwise cooking at home, basically you can do no wrong.
If I could just say one thing about the smoothies, because I know that a lot of people feel like they're doing the right thing when they're doing a smoothie, and they're adding some yogurt and they're adding some milk, plant-based milks and some nuts and seeds, and the fruit is in there just to make it a little more palatable. So I would say that that's moving towards nutritional harm reduction, right? So it's better to eat that than to eat your 2 donuts or whatever you were, or not anything at all. So that's where you're not getting the fiber, but you will get the nutrients in the vegetables that you're putting in there, right? And you get the nutrients in. So that's just why cooking soups, all these things I learned, all the nutrients stay in there. Those sauces, everything stays in there. You're cooking them, but everything stays in there. So I just want people not to feel bad about their smoothies if the most of what's in there is good for them.
Correct.
One last question. What is your opinion of organic fruits and veggies? Is it worth the added expense?
Who wants that one?
Want me to take that?
Go ahead.
So it just depends on, what is available to you. Better to eat any fresh fruit or vegetable, whether it's organic or not, better to eat them than not eat them at all because they're not organic. I think the key is to do what's within your reach. If you can find organic produce, fantastic. If you can't, eat the other ones. Wash them.
And then also refer to the environmental working groups, Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So every year they evaluate different produce and say which ones are okay to have as conventional, and others which you really should try to use organic. But again, like Fiona said, fresh vegetables, whole foods are better than processed food wannabes.
Thank you all so much for everything tonight. People are really thrilled with the presentation and sharing. One of the things that people have always liked about this organization, and it came up tonight, is like the sense of gathering, a place of connection for learning and growth. Each of the presenters through each of the presenters, I feel like we've kind of been able to recreate that sense of coming together and learning together, and recognizing that even if there are tough things and we have challenges to face, that we can do it. We had a focus on whole health and not sickness, a focus on just eating real food. And as Tim says, I'm feeling better. This food is making me feel better. So, if you're leaving with anything, we hope that change is possible. Don't be sad. You can do this. And it's okay if you need help. We all do. And if you want help connecting with community or learning more about all these things, reach out to Eating for Your Health, because they will be a wonderful partner.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for joining us. And we need your help in getting this information out. So come to our programs, send people to our programs. Donations always help as well. But we really are in a position now that we are ready to deliver programs virtually. We are ready when we can to be delivering them in person. We want to just share as much information to make your journey towards better health one that you're not going alone. So please, I'm just going to share my screen one more time, showing the programs that we have, the What's in Your Grocery Cart, the Breakfast Challenge starting on February 6th. That's fun to do with somebody else. Understanding inflammation in your diet, the building blocks of nutrition, understanding the macronutrients, My Food Story, the journey of understanding a young person's perspective, and Nourish to Flourish, which is a month-long program that meets once a week, how to live successfully with diabetes. And then we're adding more all the time. So please tell people about us, come to our programs, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Pishrati, Tim and Heather, Addie and Fiona and Tammy for making this all happen, and Kim for hosting us and sharing your community with us.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.